Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Jams and Tea Podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And this week, we are coming at you with two big, heavy music releases, new albums from two artists in the metal scene who, frankly, could not be more different. We have the young up-and-comer doing interesting stuff. We've got Poppy with her latest album, Empty Hands, and we have the final Megadeth album, the self-titled Megadeth album. Yeah. So, of these two metal figures, let's focus on the one that has been closest to the immediate moment in terms of how close people are paying attention to them. So that would be Poppy. And Poppy has such a long history for an artist that I feel like has only really been big since the pandemic. I'm not necessarily sure where you come in with Poppy in particular, but were you a fan before I Disagree, or were you a fan after that?
No, I came on after I disagree, but I had seen her original YouTube performance art stuff back in high school.
It's very weird because I, for a long time, didn't even associate that these were the same thing. Because I remember Poppy from the YouTube videos of being like this weird internet horror ARG AI thing that, I mean, in hindsight, was incredibly forward looking and prescient on many levels. And she kind of did that and then flirted with making music that was like ambient and electronic at first, funnily enough. But then she actually tried to kind of push herself as a pop star. And with each kind of major release, she kind of shed more of the irony and the sort of satirical parts of herself and just kind of gradually began to embody some of the heavier inclinations of her sound. Primarily on the album Am I a Girl, which is kind of the focal point for when Poppy really becomes who we know her as. There's a really notable collaboration on that album called Play Destroy, where she teams up with Grimes, and you can sort of see where Poppy is trying to position herself. The heavy alt girl kind of thing is kind of back in full force in a lot of ways, and she's kind of led that charge. And ever since I Disagree, which is an album that combines bubblegum pop that you wouldn't find out of place on a Carly Rae Jepsen album and riffs that are probably taken straight off of the most recent Gojira album and smash them together, it was a new interesting combo that was done with a lot of talent and just did it in a way that felt inherently less like kitschy than some of the fusions of pop and metal that we've seen in this space. Like Baby Metal, for instance, is kind of one of those bigger bands like that. And all my love to Baby Metal, they're a cool band and all, but the music itself doesn't really do much for me. So when Poppy comes onto the scene with Grit, when she's really putting herself forward performance wise when that really wasn't kind of her deal when she started off. I've been following her and have a great amount of respect for her. And that's to say, I haven't loved everything she's made. In fact, the album After I Disagree that we did cover on this channel, I kind of hated just because it was very amorphous. It was very much an album that didn't really feel like it wanted to be anything specific, and it kind of abandoned a lot of the things that I really liked about her. And since then, she's had releases that bounce back and forth between trying to do some sort of more mainstream stuff that doesn't really stick the landing or hold much water, and then kind of pivoting into her more extreme tendencies. And so now we have Empty Hands here, and I think the most notable thing from Poppy is that this comes after a very big collaboration, of course, with one of my favorite modern metal bands, Knocked Loose. She very prominently featured on one of the big singles for their last album and absolutely kicked the fucking door down on it and performed her insane scream on that song on late night, which is dope as fuck and made a bunch of people wet their pants. Good metal, scare your parents metal is alive and well. So I was wondering, like, because she was so good in this collaboration, are we going to take her music maybe a little bit more towards this really big, sludgier, sort of punk, hardcore punk, metalcore sound? And the answer to this query is kinda. Jen, this is a very eclectic album. It's got a lot of things going on in it. It's doing a whole lot. How would you say that you responded to it? Because I found this to be a deeply engaging album. I think that there's a lot of inconsistency on display, but the more I listened to this, the less that inconsistency started to matter.
I was immediately charmed by the way that this album flirts with industrial and especially like glitchy touches in the opening track, Public Domain, has some of that glitchy percussion, glitchy
Nine Inch Nails ass
synths.
drums, for sure.
Yeah, Nine Inch Nails drums all over this thing. And I loved when the melody kicked in on Public Domain because that's the thing is that yes, this can be at times a very strange album, an album that flirts with a lot of different influences. But when it locks in, when Poppy just like needs to carry a sentiment forward as directly as possible, she does that by going back to the traditional stylings, right?
Mhm.
Heavy breakdowns, heavy riffs, large vocal presence, all the fundamentals that you want out of something like this. And those big moments where, you know, all the music comes out and she gets her one-liner and then bam, we go into the breakdown. That's all over this. And so for me, it was a nice blend of a kind of traditional metal album mixed with flirtations with industrial sounds, alternative sounds, J-pop as well. There's some really bright, shiny, glistening vocal licks on this that I was very
Oh yeah.
surprised by and happy to listen to that add something really unique to Poppy's performance style, where she'll switch back and forth between this very, and she's talked about her love of J-pop and that influence on her music before, but she'll go back and forth between this very sweet J-pop melodic delivery style, and then half a second later, it will just cut back in and it'll be her screaming at the top of her lungs. And it can be very jarring in a way that makes a lot of these songs really hit, and a lot of the messages come through very sharply. So I also really, really enjoyed this. I want to especially shout out Dying to Forget, where those hybridizations of her vocal stylings are at its best, as well as what ends up being a really consistent bit of thematic material through the second act of this album,
Yeah.
which is addressing basically the bystander effect,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Exploring how she experiences negative feelings toward people who seem to be paralyzed by the moment, right?
Mm.
Stood for nothing, so you fell for everything is a key lyric on Dying to Forget for me. And Time Will Tell as well is another moment where she's kind of reflecting on the idea that if you're not actively participating in the present day in some kind of way, then you're not going to be fulfilled. Whether that's revolution or whether that's making art or whether that's just like making sure that you're hanging out with your friends and having a good time and not killing yourself because of your job, right? You have to do something. And that's what a lot of this album becomes about is the act of doing something, finding some motivation. I mean, that's what the titular concept Empty Hands is about. That's what you're left with when you spend all your time in the empty room, right? Not doing anything. You will return with empty hands if you return at all.
You know, this entire album, I was wondering exactly where is Poppy situating herself lyrically? Because I kind of find her work from I Disagree onward kind of inseparable from her story. And I kind of left that out intentionally in that basically a lot of the reason why she had such a drastic pivot in the 2010s is she had a falling out with some of her managers of the previous project they were a part of that like really screwed her over in a tons of like deals and stuff. And she sort of alluded to but never directly mentioned that there was a lot more than that, that there was potentially some form of abuse going on. And in the albums and I Disagree forward, you feel that frustration very strongly on all of these albums. It is, I mean, basically, Poppy embodies the woman scorned trope and takes it to its logical extreme. And what I love about the best moments of Poppy's discography is that when she's at her best like this, when she's at her most venomous, it's when she kind of embodies this whole like, I'm the captain of the cheer team in high school, and now I'm also in a metal band, and I'm going to call you a punk bitch loser and say that you're awful, and I'm going to bully the shit out of you. And there is kind of something really compelling about that. Like somebody who's just so like nasty and petty and mean, but for virtuous reasons within the context of their own music, so it gives you a kind of built-in catharsis. And part of me was like, I understand wanting to talk about this stuff in your music, and I love bands like the Dillinger Escape Plan, which is a band that I thought about a lot when listening to this, and Greg Puciato's solo work. But all Dillinger Escape Plan albums, every single one of them are all about being in abusive relationships. They do not have a whole lot of thematic variance over the course of their records. And Poppy, you can kind of say the same thing, but there's there's different ways that you can or cannot keep making the same thing interesting. But I think how Poppy does it on here, aside from smartly synthesizing a lot of the things she's done in the past, but also I was very impressed with the thematic arc of this record. Because if you pay attention to the songwriting, a lot of the first half of the album is about Poppy in pursuit. Like she is describing herself as Jason Voorhees, and the men who wronged her are camp counselors, and it is fucking open season throughout this album. It is like her wanting to hunt down and pursue them. It's a very present element of several different tracks. And you kind of see her gradually go from more aggro to a little bit more thoughtful in songs that kind of feel like they have a bit more dynamism to them in the second half. And eventually she comes to the point on songs like Blink, Ribs, and Empty Hands, where she realizes that, well, to put it simply, this person isn't worth her time or her effort. All of the effort that she is expending hating this person and just wanting them to die and wanting them to punish them and, still being them deserving of punishment, but she decides, like, nah, I don't think that you're worth this. So the meanest thing I can do is leave you alone forever. And that's what Ribs is that her just being like, peace out, bye. And that's why Empty Hands, the title track, hits so hard, is because once she's gone and accepted it, she gets one last kind of punch in to be like, I'm leaving you, and here's a fucking barn burner about how cool I am for leaving you. And again, you feel it heavy because Poppy is really kind of she's become very good at synthesizing her heavy elements and her pop elements. On I Disagree, it kind of felt like those songs structurally, they would kind of here's a song for that's a pop song for a minute, and then here's a metalcore breakdown for another minute, and then here is a shoegaze song right after that. It's very much like there's a lot of variance, but at the same time, it's something that doesn't really do a lot of stitching sounds together to make something new. I would argue that since then she's gotten better at it, and I think that on here she's kind of channeling again. We kind of mentioned Nine Inch Nails. I think the biggest influence that I picked up on is actually Marilyn Manson. The album cover of Empty Hands even kind of looks like an abstract homage to Mechanical Animals, and in fact, I kind of think this whole album sounds a lot like Mechanical Animals and how there's a lot of electronic production that's very like these very kind of slowed down break beats that are in the background of this album like many many different times, and I really
Yeah.
like that element when like Poppy aims for a kind of trap adjacent percussion in her stuff. It actually works because it's built into the backbone of these songs, and she kind of weaves in and out doing this thing, and sometimes the production backs her up. I think that she's gotten really great at screaming. I think her screams are even better than they were on I Disagree, and I think that that comes from working with Brian Garris because, like, listen to her screams on here. She is trying to scream like Brian Garris, and I mean, she gets like 75% of the way there, which is fucking impressive because most people can't do that shit. Unless your name's Rob Halford, you can't fucking do that. It's impossible. So there are moments where the production doesn't emphasize the instrumental quite as much as her, and it feels a little bit off balance to me. It feels a bit off kilter. And some of the structural choices that come in, sometimes they'll be a little bit more limp than I'd like. But the writing here, it kind of always kept me anchored. There's this one line at the very end of Empty Hands that I felt like was like, this is probably my favorite lyric of the entire year so far. And it's simple. It's just, you die to never be forgotten. I heard that and I got like chills. I was just like, oh, ooh, that's such a
That's good.
great, like, you
That
know
one
what
stuck to me as well.
that lyric reminded me a lot of Corey Taylor. It reminded me a lot of the early Slipknot stuff, where again, it's very honestly, I think that there's a lot of Slipknot in this album too. There is a lot of it's in the dynamism she achieves on here, which is very specific. And I love dynamism in metal. Look at my favorite metal artist. You've got Mikael Åkerfeldt of Opeth, who can do I am a screeching demon who is going to claw out your soul, and I have the most beautiful angelic voice on planet Earth, and you could listen to me sing you the phone book. And, Devin Townsend, exactly the same way. I can sit here and list countless examples of embodying this. And Poppy seems like she's there. And I feel like this album is very self-consciously, it feels like this might be the first step in a direction that she hasn't really covered before. I feel like this is an example of a transitional album that might be looked at more positively in hindsight, even though people are generally liking this. But there are a lot of little things here. But again, the writing is kind of stronger than it's ever been with her. Some of those, like, sometimes her pop feminism tendencies on those previous records, they rang as a bit hollow sometimes and just kind of felt like they lacked impact. Here, though, if even if the line isn't great, it's drenched in venom. She's so fucking pissed on this album, man. It's got a really interesting flow to it. It's got a really immediate first half and a really ambitious second half. I was kind of middling on this when I first listened to it, and then with each listen, I liked it like a lot more upon revisiting it. I was like, no, there's something here. I feel like that she has arrived at a point where she is at her heaviest and her most pop centric. These melodies, these hooks, they're great. They're really solid.
Yeah, she really is in like peak form on kind of both sides of the music that inspire her whole project.
And yeah, I mean, I had a really great time with this, and it's probably the most I have enjoyed a Poppy album since I Disagree. I don't think it's quite on that level for me, just because that is a record that I come back to and I'm still like, God damn, this still really holds up. I wish that this coming out a year before COVID didn't like memory hole it into oblivion, but she's been successful since, and I hope that this is a step towards maybe like because I listen to so much extreme metal. I gotta be in kind of a specific mood to listen to stuff like this because, again, I've been listening to Knocked Loose like nonstop for the last 2 years. So my standards for heaviness, I will admit, are a little bit unfair, perhaps, against stuff like this. But Poppy is meant to be a gateway artist. You're supposed to listen to Poppy and be like, I want to try out like that Deftones band now. And I respect gateway artists and gateway albums immensely because they are sorely undervalued in the critical conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, I think getting into this one, you're getting an interesting genre hybrid. You're getting consistently very good writing, and you're getting great vocal performances all across this thing. So, just on a base level, if you're any at all interested in the idea of a metal album that's influenced by things like bubblegum pop and Nine Inch Nails and a little bit of Slipknot and even a smidge, just a little sprinkling of like digicore synth production and grunge on Eat the Hate. Very
Eat
grungy
the Hate
riffs and
fucking
melodies all over that one.
slams. I love that song. It's kind of a head empty song, but like, man, if I wasn't driving down the fucking road to this morning being like, fuck, yeah,
On that song in
yes.
particular, the like Nine Inch Nails drums with that bass lick underneath it. Oh
Oh,
man.
yes. You know, like I mentioned, there's a lot of like breakbeats and stuff on this album that are very kind of atmospherically implemented. And it made me think, like, the pop leanings on this album made me think of Frou Frou. It made me think of their
Mm.
album details. There are songs like Let Go and Must Be Dreaming that have this very airy production to them with this kind of sort of lighter beat sound to it, but it's like Poppy took that sound and then kind of flipped it on its head. And I love that shit. Like that is a galaxy brain idea and it's pulled off really really well here. So I'm just happy Poppy is still out there and taking risks and being cool.
Hell yeah. Big love to Poppy.
Thumbs
Big thumbs
up,
up from me. All right. Let me help you out with this one.
please. I'm gonna need it.
So, the other record that we're talking about today is the self-titled Megadeth album, the final Megadeth album, as Dave Mustaine has pretty much announced his retirement following the tour that will be in support of this album.
I
And
imagine it went something like, "This is my final album." Dave Mustaine.
I'm Dave Mustaine.
Hello, me. It's me again.
So the thing about the self-titled Megadeth album is that as a person that has not listened to a lot of this band's music, I thought someone was playing a trick on me. When I started listening to this, I thought I was being pranked because I mean, this is Megadeth we're talking about, right? This is like a band, and I've listened to you guys talk about Megadeth before with the review of their album, The Sick, the Dying, and the Dead from a few
Yep.
years ago. This is a band that is like in the upper echelon of mainstream metal bands in terms of notoriety,
Yep.
and Mustaine's, alumna status as an original member of Metallica has always kind of carried Megadeth forward as like a high banner object. And then I listened to the way that the vocals are mixed on the first song of this album, and I wonder when the candid cameras will be revealed and the real Dave Mustaine will appear before me to give me the album that I asked for today.
Oh
Because
man.
I can't stress enough, it is an absolute non-starter with this album, how bad the layering is on this, how bad the master job is on this. And the song Tipping Point is one of the worst examples of it, even because you get this decent riff to start us off, but then the drums are too loud and the vocals are even louder. And the only thing worse than how loud the vocals are in this mix is what the vocals are actually doing in this mix, because Mustaine, it doesn't sound good. It's not giving what it needs to give, as some might say. I saw Foreigner at Bourbon and Beyond.
How old are those guys now?
Enough. And you're always gonna
Closer to being 100 than most.
you're always going to run the risk of when you go to a show like that, right? At this weekend festival that you just so happen to be at, this really old band with a few really, really remarkable, notable songs is going to be playing. And it's always a toss up whether or not the show is going to be enjoyable at all. But let me tell you what, I had a great time at that Foreigner set because their vocalist still had it.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh
they
yeah.
even surprised it with, they announced his retirement at that show. And so they brought out this
That's
younger
crazy.
guy who's like gonna be replacing him and gonna be their new like touring vocalist. And then they started doing all the big songs together, like they did I Don't Know What Love Is and a Jukebox Hero
Ah,
together. It was such a nice moment. It felt like such a wonderful show. Do you know how much time I've spent caring about Foreigner in my life before or after that? None.
zero.
All of that is to say, me as the uninundated listener of Megadeth that I am, I held out a little bit of hope that I was going to be getting a unique experience of being introduced to a band at a very particular time, right? The final moment, they're not necessarily resting on their laurels. That's not how this has to be done, but going for one final big project, right? One final big swing, and we're just calling it Megadeth because it's us. This is us.
This
This
is
is
the real
Megadeth,
one.
baby. So, Jake, give me, inform me on your relationship with this band and your expectations for this record. What happened once you started listening to it?
Megadeth are such a strange band, and I even truly hesitate to call them a band because Megadeth is Dave Mustaine. Let's make no bones about it. Megadeth has always just been Dave Mustaine and company. And I feel like the mixing on this album is so emblematic of that because what are the two things that bury everything else on this album? The vocals and the guitar, the thing that Dave Mustaine does. And so naturally, the drums on this, man, the fills, it's like I was like, huh, what do I can't. It was truly an experience I did not anticipate from Megadeth because if you go back and listen to our coverage of the previous record, which yeah, I was also not a fan of, but I mean, like, we could at least say that there were pockets of it that, again, sounded pretty solid. There were moments of like really muscular instrumentation. And it's like, okay, this is something. And, I'm glad that you're here to kind of validate my opinion of this because I wasn't fond of The Sick, the Dying, and the Dead, but I feel like you could reasonably see my assessment of that record and be like, oh, well, you just don't like Dave Mustaine, and so you don't like this album. And you know what? If you want to make that argument, I'm 28 years old. I'm gonna admit it. That could be the case. Maybe I just really don't like Dave Mustaine, but that doesn't explain why I like the first like five Megadeth albums. And I'm not even saying that I like those albums. I like love them. I think that some of those are the best 80s thrash has to offer. Like of the big four of thrash, I feel like if you are trying to argue that Metallica didn't win that war, you don't live in the same dimension as the rest of us. When it comes to an enduring catalog and when it comes to success and when it comes to being a household name, it's them and everyone else, and the distance between the two is vast. And like again, you could call me a Metallica fanboy, which fine, sure, but I've been listening to Megadeth for just as long. And Megadeth have always kind of been the second place band. They've always been the band that like they've got more classics than like Slayer does, and generally speaking, like Anthrax is just sort of the internally most underrated band of those four because they're really not a thrash band. They're actually a punk band, but you know, that's a video essay for another day. The thing is about Dave Mustaine that's essential to understanding why this album is the way that it is, especially when it comes to the writing, is that Dave Mustaine has not been able to get off of the coattails of Metallica for 45 fucking years. He literally cannot let this shit go. I don't need to go in an entire huge history lesson, but Dave Mustaine was in Metallica. He was a drunk asshole. They kicked him out. They weren't nice to him. Sure, fine, I get that, but you and your, a band on the road in the 80s and you can't hide behind a wall of social media to insulate you from the people you don't like. Yeah, you're probably going to get kicked off and given a fucking bus ticket. And every time Dave Mustaine is granted or afforded the ability to be like, I was in that band once and we could have really been like, it is like listening to Uncle Rico in Napoleon Dynamite talk about how he used to play football and how he could throw a football over them mountains over there. It's just pathetic. And I'm not even saying pathetic in the general sort of negative adjective way. I mean that Dave Mustaine is a pathetic person. And I hate saying that because, like, the dude, at least, he became successful after that. Lots of great records that came. And, he had a battle with cancer that he fought and, came out on the other end. And I wanted this to be good. I wanted to say this was better than albums like Dystopia. I wanted to say this was better than albums like The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead. And I just can't. The writing on here, would prefer him to go back to his shitty centrist politics and sing about those than the complete nothing burger of this album, which is just vague anti-war sentiments, vague anti-conformity sentiments, just the vaguest fucking R slash I'm 14 and this is deep. I've discovered for the first time that politics are bad and just like the most cursor. Like, dude, you wrote Holy War's The Punishment Due, a thrash metal song about conflict in the Middle East, and that's one of your most beloved songs. And you couldn't think of fucking anything in 2025 to actually write about other than the first half of this, which is just war and I don't give a shit about anything and blah. And then the second half, he's still whining about not being in Metallica. Look at the lyrics to some of these songs, and he's just like talking about how I won't be left behind by you. I won't let you ruin what we tried to do. Like all these sentiments, it's just like you're just talking to Lars Ulrich and James Hetfield. You are still trying to settle this 40-year-long grudge that, like, it's like the fucking guy in the elevator in the Mad Men meme. They don't think about you, man. They're probably too busy counting their fucking money from the Black Album. It is so disappointing to witness somebody who at one point did have things to say artistically, did actually like the best way I can put this whole Megadeth and Metallica dichotomy thing that I hate bringing up, but Dave forces you to on an album like this is that Metallica, after Dave Mustaine, made songs about war. They made songs about alienation, the evils of the military industrial complex. Dave Mustaine made music about himself. it is always filtered through how these issues affect him. He doesn't story tell, he kind of speaks from his own voice, and that's fine. You can make that work. But when the writing is so vague here, I just, what do you want me to take away when every song is fucking just, a half decent riff and then some really like aggressively basic, simple rhyme scheme lyrics, stuff that like songwriting 101, if you were 15 years old and you started writing songs, you'd be like, some of this is hack shit. Like this isn't like they didn't even try. They just tried to force a rhyme here to make some general point, and there's nothing there. And when the sound of it, when I can't even enjoy the riffs, when you Jen, let me tell you something. Do you want to know who the current rhythm guitarist is for Megadeth? Do you want to know what their name is?
What is their name?
Their first name is Timu. Their first name is Timu. The
Are
jokes
you about
write
to be
themselves.
racist?
Like, what can I even fucking add to that, man? I'm very animated and I seem very angry right now, and I'm really not. I'm mostly just frustrated that when you call your shot like this, and it's like, this is the self-titled, this is the last album, you gotta do something more than this. I feel such a lack of effort because, I would still clown on Dave Mustaine for sounding like a little Baldur's Gate goblin because that's what he sounds like. He sounded like that since the 80s, and I've grown accustomed to it. But now it's like it's at the top of the mix. The
Yeah,
top of the mix.
it's
You don't
really
need
loud.
that. It is such an act of strange self-sabotage and narcissism that you just like, have you ever seen by chance the documentary Some Kind of Monster about the making of Saint Anger?
No, I know I need to.
It's it is a fascinating documentary because you get to see a look at the process of bands at their biggest making the stupidest decisions they possibly can purely because they can. And like, it's an interesting window into seeing what that looks like because it happens all the time. But in it, Dave Mustaine shows up for Saint Anger. So this is a long time since he was in this band, and they're doing therapy and he's still fucking talking about this is in 2002, and he's sitting there whining about being kicked out of the fucking band, and everybody's sitting there like, I thought that he was like actually going to talk about something other than the fact that we kicked him out of the band 20 years ago, but alas, it just, why are we singing about it? There's so much material right now. There's so much stuff. Like, make a fucking shitty album about how you want illegal immigrants deported or something. At least that's a fucking idea, dude. Jesus Christ. Actually
I
stand for something. Like, be annoying instead of be nothing. Like, the last two albums were annoying. They had obnoxious sentiments in them and centrist grandstanding, and it was annoying and obnoxious, and it was disappointing to see that from somebody who was a vocal critic of the Iraq War. And now I don't even have to complain about the politics of this album. This album has no politics. It has a song called I Don't Care on it. And he literally is just saying he doesn't care about a bunch of things. That's the song conceit. That's it. It's him
I
listing a
don't
thing.
care about fill in the blank. That's the entire lyrical conceit of the
And
thing.
even if like, I would at least have something to say if these songs were consistent within themselves. You have songs like "Hey God?" question mark exclamation point, which
Oh my God.
ha ha ha, this fucking song is nonsense. It's literally just like him listing a bunch of individual things and then being like, "What about that, God?" And it's like,
It is peak Reddit atheism.
oh my God,
It's the
100%.
professor from the first God's Not Dead movie. Uh
Oh God,
no.
literally like, there's war. Say something, Jesus. Like,
Two things about this song. One, no metal album with this cover art should have the word insecure appear on it anywhere, in any context. The word insecure should not be in your lyric sheet if this is your cover art. For two, I'm always taking up your time. I'm always missing when you call. Which is it? You can't do both.
that is a completely contradictory statement. And like there are so many songs on this album that suffer from verse chorus dissonance syndrome, where
Yeah,
the chorus of the song will happen and you're like, "Oh, that's what you were singing about?" On one of the singles, Puppet Parade, dude is complaining about like the 9 to 5, working a difficult job that you hate kind of thing. And then like comes in with the chorus being like it's a parade of puppets, and I'm like, that's more of like a political thing, and you're kind of talking about like kind of a structural thing here. Like these two things don't really have as much overlap as the song kind of seems to imply that it does.
he's trying to
And
do like a Joe versus the volcano type thing where it's like capitalism has gotten so bad that we're all forced to work a 9 to 5, and that's
like
not really what's going on here,
it's
dude.
it's a step in the right direction, but it's not, again, it's kind of recognizing that something is bad is not politics. That's common sense. Like, oh, there's a problem with this. That you didn't elaborate. You didn't like talk about anything. And I mean, like the closest this gets to having an interesting song conceit is I Am War, which two guesses to what that song could possibly be about. But even in how Dave describes being a war embodying entity, it's generic. There's like I don't feel the pull of the anti-war sentiments on Megadeth albums on from the 80s. Like because when you listen to that, I could at least give him the benefit of the doubt and be like, I feel like he's writing about the same things as Metallica because he does genuinely care about them. Because at the end of the day, these were a bunch of guys from the middle of nowhere who got together and they had some bones to pick with the establishment. And then you could argue they became the establishment later, which, you can feel whatever way
I
you
mean,
want about
Metallica
it.
definitely did.
Well, for sure.
We got a whole book about Napster to let you know
Ugh.
that.
And I mean, like, look, Metallica have their own host of plentiful, bountiful issues and intolerable members in their own right. But I at least buy that they felt passionately about what they're talking about. Same with Dave. I don't feel the passion here at all. Like, for as washed up as a band as Metallica are now, with bands like 72 Seasons and then before that, I don't know. I feel like it's everything but their passion that's letting them down. Whereas here, it's like, I don't really feel like this album stood much of a chance. And I had that mentality the whole way through. And then, boop, the clock strikes midnight, and the final song on this album is a cover of Ride the Lightning by Metallica.
Are you
One
kidding me?
one of the 5 songs that Dave Mustaine has a writing credit on and can legally use. And look, I don't object to putting this here out of principle. I do think it is genuinely so pathetic. Like there is no word I can think of to better describe this other than, dude, what are you doing? And I would be so much less bothered by this if this song was in any way interesting or worthwhile. It has all the same issues as the rest of the album's mixing. So basically, it's Dave being like, this is what Ride the Lightning would have been like if I did it, and you heard me the most instead of Lars's stupid drums. Fucking sell out. Whatever, Dave. Just I wish him all the best. Go retire, have fun living in a big old mansion, but like I feel sad for him that this is where he is at the end of his career and the end of his life, is that he is still desperately clinging to the coattails of the boys who bullied him in high school and he never got over. He never got over this moment. And it's like, man, I wish you did. I really do, because it like we live in a world where you were a better version of yourself and you probably made better music, because this petty empty shit, it feels like a subtweet, not an album.
Yeah, I mean, this complete inability to focus and like to dedicate himself to any lyrical concept makes this whole album just feel like a series of half measures, right? Is this an
Couldn't have said it better.
anti-war thing? Is this a rock god final march thing? Is it a sentimental farewell thing? It tries to be all of them at some point, and it gets closer to succeeding in some of them in some places than it does in others. Like I have a little bit more sympathy towards like Made to Kill
Hmm.
than I Am War because at least that's getting directly at the roots of the whole like, if you zoom out far enough, there is an industrial system of bodies being shipped out to the third world to continue to ravage it.
Yup.
But again, that's just like identifying a problem is not politics.
And it feels like Dave is at the point where he doesn't really engage with these things. He just kind of recognizes that they're happening and kind of plugs them into the Mad Libs of his lyricism. And I know that's a deeply ingenuous way to sort of like read what he's doing here, but again, I just do not feel the passion. The moments in which modern Megadeth are, at their best is when they're kind of cutting loose and being goofy and making a big dumb song like Let There Be Shred, which I don't even really like because of the way it sounds, but I would respect this album so much more if it was kind of like a dumb party album that kind of sounded like 80s thrash instead, rather than this incredibly forgettable, ultimately what will be remembered as a footnote in the career of, that guy who was in that other band. Like that it's like you are seeing the Streisand effect in real time manifest as it's like if you stopped talking about these things, dude, I have a feeling that they'd allow you to move past it. Like it would be best for everybody. Just go and have fun. Just don't make any more music, Dave. We're good. We're good. We've got the classic albums. We're fine. We don't need any more of this. And I know that it's a little bit naive of me to even want to be like, hey, I kind of wish that modern metal bands at large, there's a lot of fraught political happenings right now, and we kind of need somebody to speak to that. And the 80s were a time period in which even commercial thrash was able to comment on these things. So let's do that, but we're not getting that here. We're not.
Sad.
Sad.
Sad album.
I was about to say a numeric score to this album doesn't even like I can't give one. It's sad out of 10. Teardrop on my guitar out of 10. I don't know why I referenced that song specifically, but it felt right.
Teardrop on
Now I'm
Dave's
imagining
guitar.
Dave Mustaine like really sad listening to Taylor Swift songs, but picturing James Hetfield instead.
Nah, he's bumping that Charlie XCX diss track, being like,
God, you know what?
"This is
Yeah,
just
you're
like
right.
me and that guy in
Dave,
that other
Dave
band.
Mustaine
If only
listens
I
to
could have been
Brat
in the
and is like,
band."
finally, someone who understands me. All right, everybody, let us know what you thought of these two albums or any new albums in general. We're going to be looking for stuff to cover in the coming week. So if you are interested in hearing us talk about anything, let us know. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fun engagement jazz. But until next time, everybody, rock over London, rock on Chicago. Every kiss begins with K. K Jewelers.